Hi everyone, it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. I'm back home again. My son got released from the hospital. He still needs a lot of prayers. He's very sick, and but I know that God is able to do all good things for him, just like He is for you and me. So we're continuing on the book of Ghost of the Moaning Mansion. If you remember last time, DJ's grandpa Dylan, he went to help this old friend of his. And he was riding a bus to go and help her find out what was going on in this crazy old mansion that's making noises. So he did not show up. So Grandpa's missing. So we're on chapter 2. The mystery deepens. Oh, they've got this picture here. Maybe that's what the mansion looked like. DJ felt his heart slide right down to his bare feet. He loved Grandpa in a special way. Then DJ brightened. "Oh, I know why," he said. "He told Mrs. Keene that he didn't want anybody to know he was coming. So Grandpa must be nosing around without anybody knowing he's there." Dad Dylan took a slow, deep breath while considering the possibility that DJ was right. Sam Dillon's immense chest seemed out of proportion to his stocky body. His legs were short, but everything else about him was powerful from a lifetime of hard work outdoors. "That sounds like your grandfather, all right, DJ. He always did have a mind of his own. Well, I hope you're right." DJ's stepmother came in from the back porch where the boy could hear she'd started the washing machine. "Who was on the phone, Sam?" she asked. Her short blonde hair had already been brushed quickly. She was slightly plump, with a nervous habit of letting her hands flutter when she talked. It had been hard for DJ to get used to the idea of Dad being married to anyone besides his mom, who was buried in the cemetery near the town school. DJ called the former widow Higgins to Mom. Widow means that her husband had died. He had been unable to call her mother or mom because that's what he had called his own late mom. But Dad's new wife was DJ's mom too. So he called her to Mom as a satisfactory compromise. "Mrs. Keene just called about my father," Dad replied. He walked to the kitchen range and lifted the lid on the stainless steel pot of oatmeal bubbling there. To Mom asked, "What about him?" Dad glanced at DJ and then explained about Grandpa's trip. To Mom had gone over to stir the oatmeal. She placed the wooden spoon on the range top and turned to look at her husband. "I don't like that, Sam. Since there's no such thing as ghosts, that means somebody's up to something no good. It could be dangerous." "Now, Hannah, don't get yourself so upset. My father's all right. In a few days he'll be home bragging about how he chased this ghost thing and scared it so bad it left town." Dad grinned at his own humor, but DJ wasn't so sure. "Two Mom could be right," he said. "Whatever's behind the ghost thing must have good reason, and that might be strong enough to make him dangerous to anybody who's poking around." Dad scowled. "Is that why you wanted to go with your grandfather? To get yourself in danger and worry Hannah and me half to death?" DJ gulped. "Blech." He hadn't meant to do anything that would keep him from still going to Devil's Law. Two Mom poured a cup of coffee and handed it to her husband. I still don't like it. Something's mighty strange has been going up on that place ever since Mrs. Keene bought it and started fixing it up. That probably means somebody doesn't want her to have the place, or they're trying to scare her off. Or ruin her. I mean, what with her sinking her life saving into restoring the place and all. 9-year-old Priscilla came yawning from the hallway. She was a grumpy person when she first got up. Her brown hair was always wild, but this morning it was a total disaster from not having been combed yet. What's going on? She asked in her grouchy voice. You're all talking so loud you woke me up. She dropped sleepily into one of the upholstered plastic breakfast chairs by the formica-topped table. Priscilla was DJ's stepsister. Her father, Two Mom's first husband, had been killed in a logging accident sometime before DJ's own mother died. Two Mom and Dad had been married less than a year now. DJ explained quickly about Grandpa and the ghost, and he got a cup from the pegs on the wall by the range. He poured himself some hot chocolate and sat down at his regular place across from his stepsister. Her brown eyes widened with interest. If it's not a ghost, and Grandpa catches whatever it is, then what? Catches whoever is more likely, the way it is, Dad said, sipping his coffee. But I don't think my father is going to do anything more than poke around so he can get a good look at Mrs. Keene's eyes. Sometimes I think he's kind of stuck on her. Why, Sam, Two Mom explained. They're just two old childhood friends. DJ looked at his father with sudden curiosity. Grandpa's just trying to help her out, he said. I just wish you'd made him promise to phone us when he arrived, Two Mom said. Well, everyone wash up for breakfast so DJ can start studying. An hour later, bundled up in boots, heavy winter jacket, and a new green and red stocking cap, DJ climbed up the steep stairs. To Alfred Milford's house. It had been taken some talking to convince Dad and Two Mom to let Dad leave home without working on his history composition. The boy had persuaded them by explaining how Alfred would be able to help him study at the library. Alfred was a year younger and a grade behind, but he was so smart. Some of the kids called him the brain. Alfred seemed to know about everything, or he knew how to look it up. The door opened at the top of the stairs, and Alfred came out while DJ was only halfway up. The two friends grinned at each other and called greetings. Hi! DJ was tall and thin, but Alfred was downright skinny. He looked like a scarecrow in a heavy winter coat, too big and too long for him. He had an owlish look from wearing heavy glasses thick as the bottom of a soda pop bottle. He wore a Russian-style cap with ear flaps turned down. His scuffed boots, which were too big, clumped clumsily as he hurried down the wooden stairs. I was just going to the little store to call you, DJ, Alfred said, giving his friend a friendly punch on the right shoulder. Let's take the dogs and go exploring. DJ took a deep breath. Can't, he explained about his problem. Alfred groaned, unconsciously using his gloved right thumb to push his glasses up higher in his nose. Want to stay here and study at the library? You got any good books on California history? Some. Pick them up at garage sales, mostly for a dime. Are you looking for anything special? Do you know anything about Devil's Law? That's across the town from Nugget County. I've been there, read up on it, but I don't have much of it in my books. You better go to the library. Wait till I tell my mom. A short time later, the boys were hurrying through the crisp, clear December morning towards Stony Ridge Tiny Branch Library. DJ explained all about Mrs. Keene's problem with the ghost, and Grandpa's taken the bus to check out the situation. Wow, Alfred cried, picking up a handful of snow from a vacant lot they were cutting across. Couldn't we have fun catching whoever it was behind all this ghost business? Sure could, DJ agreed. He watched his friend mold the snowball and toss it at an old tin can glistening in the melting snow. Hey, Alfred cried, his face lighting up with idea. If you got your composition written fast, do you think maybe your folks would let you go over to the mansion? We still got 5 days left before the Christmas vacation ends. DJ thought about that, feeling his boots sliding a little on the frozen trail across the lot. Be worth a try. But there's so much research to do before I can write. I already know some of the things about Devil's Law, Alfred interrupted. I'll tell you, and you write them down in your own way. While you're doing that, I'll look up references and things because Mrs. Keene always wants a bibliography. The boys reached the high concrete sidewalk by the small branch library just as an old mud-splattered sedan nosed up to the curb. DJ said, "That's Brother Paul's car." Paul Stagg was the lay preacher of Stony Ridge's only church. Both boys liked the big man and hurried to meet him. All the car's windows had been covered with frost during the night. Small areas had been scraped clean so that the driver could see, but the car's heater apparently wasn't working, for the windows were steamed up. Through the windshield, smeared where the wipers had barely removed the snow and road grime, DJ could see Brother Paul's face. He was 6'4", but he looked 7 foot tall. In his usual saddle-colored cowboy boots and high-peaked 10-gallon Stetson, that's a big cowboy hat. When he slid out of the car to the pavement, DJ saw the man had on an old sheepskin working cowboy's coat and faded blue jeans. "Hi, Brother Paul," the boys called together. The lay preacher's deep bass voice rumbled up from his big chest. "Well, howdy, DJ Alfred. You're out bright and early this pretty day." The right front passenger door opened and Kathy Stagg stepped out. DJ broke stride at sight of the pastor's daughter. DJ hadn't seen her through the car fogged over windows. She was months younger than DJ, with reddish hair that partly escaped from under a cowgirl's white hat with wide brim and a flat crown. She wore pale gray leather boots with inch-high heels and topped with a fringe of rabbit fur. The matching blue jeans and jacket made her seem taller and more slender than usual. "Morning, DJ," she said with a smile. "Alfred, how are you?" "Fine," Alfred replied, but DJ didn't say anything. "We're going to Devil's Law," Kathy announced, pulling her leather gloves over her long, slender fingers. "That's right, boys." Brother Paul reached out a huge hand and engulfed DJ's in a powerful handshake. "Too nice a day to stay home, and my wife has a church committee meeting. So Kathy and I are going to play tourists. Want to come along?" Brother Paul finished shaking hands with Alfred. He clapped his gloved hands together. Would we? That'd be fantastic. Only, his voice dropped and he glanced at DJ. Only what? Kathy prompted. Briefly, DJ explained about his problem. Well, Brother Paul said when DJ had finished, as soon as I cash a check at the mercantile store, Kathy and I will be on our way. Sorry you boys can't come along. Me too, DJ said. He turned towards the library, which had once been a retail store. Oh, Brother Paul, would you keep an eye out for my grandpa while you're there? Give us a call tonight if you see him, okay? The lay preacher promised to do that, then led his daughter a couple doors down to the town's only grocery store. Alfred approached the library door. You should have told them about the ghost, DJ. DJ didn't answer. He was thinking about Grandpa Dillon and wondering if something really had happened to him. DJ's heart sped up. I can do it, he said with controlled excitement. Any special reason? Man, I wonder if I skipped a page. No. I thought maybe you'd like to drive. Oh, sorry. How did I get there? Found my place. I thought maybe you'd like to go for a drive over to Devil's Law with me and sort of look around for your grandfather this afternoon, said DJ's dad. His voice was low and very controlled, but DJ sensed that his father was concerned. I'll be ready when you say, Dad. Good. I'll have Hannah pack a sandwich for you, so I'll pick you up about noon at the library. DJ kept his voice calm. Okay. Oh, Dad, I thought you had to help Alfred's father deliver some firewood today. I'm going to run by John Milford's right away and see if he can't handle those deliveries by himself. DJ swallowed hard. So Dad was really worried about Grandpa. The boy kept his voice calm. Dad, would you ask Mr. Milford if Alfred could go along with us? Guess I could. Well, bye, DJ. The phone clicked dead. DJ handed the instrument back to the librarian, thanked her absently, and looked at Alfred. Quickly, DJ explained what his father had said. Alfred listened thoughtfully and then asked quietly, Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Yeah. Dad's trying not to scare me, but he's really worried about Grandpa disappearing. You'll find him, Alfred said with a smile, and faster if I go with you. Why, there's no mystery you and I can't solve together. DJ managed a weak smile. We've never had one that involved a ghost before. He turned away from the stack of books in the converted store. Well, let's try to find all I need to write the composition before Dad shows up. It was hard for DJ to concentrate on doing research for his history paper, but Alfred came up with an idea. Hey, I know. You write about Devil's Law. DJ considered that a moment. That could work, he agreed. And I could tie in the story about the mansion and the ghost and everything. Great. Mrs. Keene will give you an A for that idea for sure. Good. Let's get started, DJ replied. Within a few minutes, DJ's mind was focused on research. Though there weren't many books on the subject of the small library, Alfred found enough to keep the boy busy checking indexes and taking notes. Alfred stood on a small footstool with tiny casters to peer at the books on the top shelf. DJ sat at the library floor with his back against the far wall. His feet stuck out straight on the floor. Books that Alfred had pulled off the shelves were piled on both sides of DJ. He was a fast reader. His blue eyes skimmed the pages. Hey, Alfred, listen to this. Alfred turned around and peered down. What? This book says that most gold camps were really wild and lawless by the mid 1850s, but the 49ers claimed that the worst of all that had no law except the devil's. So that's how the town got its name, Devil's Law. Boy, Alfred mused, can you imagine a place without any law at all? What's more, DJ continued, his voice rising, a San Francisco newspaper published a story from a little girl. Alfred interrupted. I didn't think there were any women and children in gold camps. There weren't many, DJ replied, tapping the page on his lap, but there were some. Like this little girl, she wrote a letter to Jesus. To Jesus? That's what the book says. I guess somebody sent her letter to the newspaper. Here's what she wrote. Goodbye, Jesus. We're moving to Devil's Law. Both boys smiled at the idea. Then DJ took a deep breath. It's all very interesting, but we've got to know more about the Chinese laborers so we can know about the one that's supposed to haunt the mansion Mrs. Keene bought. Alfred said, let's find out how the ghost story got started. The boys still hadn't found the material when the front door opened and a blast of cold air shot through the library and onto the stacks. DJ recognized Dad's voice. We'll have to finish later, Alfred. My father's here. Alfred said he'd put the books back on the shelf, except those that DJ wanted to check out. DJ nodded his thanks and ran to meet his father at the front of the library. Anything on, Grandpa? Not a word. You ready? What about Alfred? Can he go? His folks said it's okay as long as you two stay together. All right, DJ exclaimed. He rapidly checked out some books on the desk and eagerly waved his friend forward. Come on. Dad said, if that's your last book, DJ, let's roll. DJ quickly told Alfred the good news that he could ride with the Dillons. The boys stepped outside the library and started for the family sedan parked outside on the curb. They were greeted by the loudest bark imaginable. Hero! DJ cried. Dad, you brought my dog. And Mrs. Keene, Sam Dillon replied. The boys approached the sedan. Remember, that's a family car. Mrs. Keene was sitting in the front passenger seat. She rolled her window down and called a greeting to the boys. Hi, your father was kind enough to invite me to come along, DJ, she said. I thought if you were going to have a ride with your teacher, you might also like to have your dog. Dad grinned and opened the front door to slide under the steering wheel. Mrs. Keene and I figured Hero can't do any harm, and he might help us pick up Grandpa's trail. Okay, you two get in the back seat with Hero and buckle up. DJ threw his books on the floor of the back seat and hugged his little mutt. Hero was about as ugly a dog as anyone could imagine, but he was so full of love for DJ that nothing else mattered. We'll find Grandpa, won't we, Hero? DJ asked as the mongrel flopped down in the boy's lap and rolled over sideways to have his chest rubbed. Dogs like that. Hero was half hound, a quarter Airedale, and the rest Australian Shepherd. He had the longest nose DJ had ever seen on a dog. It stuck out from his muzzle like a giant black olive, well beyond his powerful jaws. Hero was shaggy-haired, reddish-brown, and a stub-tail. He was scarred from many a fight with the bear because he was a hair puller. DJ had originally gotten Hero to chase old Satchelfoot, an outlaw bear. As the car headed down the mountains towards the foothills of Nugget County, Dad handed a brown paper sack of sandwiches across the back of the front seat. Alfred immediately took a cheese and bologna, as everyone called it, but DJ asked the question upmost in his mind. Dad, where are we going to start? Looking for Grandpa at. Dad didn't reply, and DJ had an uneasy feeling right in the pit of his stomach. Mrs. Keene replied, We've already looked at the Timber Gold County. DJ exclaimed in surprise, You have? Where? We called the sheriff's office. The sheriff's office? DJ interrupted with alarm. It seemed like the logical thing to do, DJ, Mrs. Keene explained. They checked the hospitals, the sheriff, and the highway patrol officers. Why? DJ cried in alarm. Just in case, Sam Dillon answered grimly. They can do better and faster than we could. DJ had to swallow hard before asking the next question. What did they say? Dad didn't answer. Mrs. Keene glanced at him and then turned to look over the back seat of the boys. They've had no accident reports for the last few days. No hospital admittances of anyone answering Caleb's description. Your father plans to do the same thing in Nugget County. DJ swallowed hard, fearful of what might have happened to Grandpa Dillon. Mrs. Keene changed the subject. What'd you boys study this morning? DJ explained, then added, We couldn't find anything about how the ghost story got started at the mansion. The teacher chuckled and turned to look at the boys. That happened because mostly Chinese and Irish laborers worked the Transcontinental Railroad. It was finished in 1869. The next time you head up the Interstate 80 towards Reno, look high on the mountainside and you'll see the snow sheds that were built over the rails so the trains could go through in the winter. It's the same railroad completed after the Civil War. DJ nodded. I've read about them. They look like long wooden tunnels covered with snow. Alfred finished his sandwich and asked, What's that got to do with a ghost? Mrs. Keene explained. Chinese and Irish workers were imported to work on the railroad. The Chinese had a contract that said if they were killed or died here, their bones had to be shipped back to China. That's why there are no Chinese graves in the mother lode cemeteries. Hey, DJ exclaimed, come to think of it, Alfred, and I have explored lots of those old graveyards, but we've never seen a Chinese name. That's right, Alfred agreed. We've seen headstones of Jewish, Irish, Italian, Mexican, English, and other names, but never Chinese. Mrs. Keene continued. Legend has it that one of the Chinese rail workers was killed and his body secretly buried in a hidden grave. Of course, his remains could not be shipped back to China. And, DJ guessed, when some of those prisoners imagined or heard strange sounds, they decided it must be the Chinese man's ghost. That's essentially correct, DJ. Actually, however, the story didn't get much attention until a rich timber baron bought the mansion over the grave site. At least that's what most people at the time decided had happened. Your mansion? Alfred asked. The teacher nodded. The story was the Chinese man's ghost thought his bones would never be found, so he started prowling through the mansion, moaning and groaning. Ooh, ooh. So that's how it came to be called the Moaning Mansion? Mrs. Keene nodded. Alfred shook his head. Even if the man was dead and buried, his soul would have gone to God. DJ protested. It's just a legend, Alfred. Unfortunately, Mrs. King continued, sometimes intelligent people begin to believe such things. Fear of the unknown, I guess. Sorry, it's late. Dad asked, then why'd you buy the place? Of course, I don't believe a word of the story, Mr. Dillon. Besides, there hadn't been any reports of activity of the so-called ghost for many years. Until right after you bought it, huh? Sam Dillon guessed. That's true, the teacher said. But we skipped the earlier part. What makes the mansion so ideal for a modern bed and breakfast is the rich lore of other events connected to the place. Such as, DJ prompted. Mrs. Keene said, the timber baron who built the place didn't live long, so a colonel bought the mansion. He didn't believe in the ghost, of course, and that's where all the trouble started. A colonel? Well, everybody called him that. He was a Southern sympathizer before the Civil War. After the war was over and President Lincoln had freed the slaves, the colonel supposedly still kept slaves at the mansion. He hid them in an old limestone cave or tunnel under the mansion. Alfred's eyes widened. Is there really something like that under the mansion, Mrs. Keene? She chuckled. So the story goes, Alfred, DJ mused. I remember from 4th grade California history that this state was admitted to the Union as a free state, and slavery was never legal here. That's true, DJ. But there are historical cases of slaves being kept in California. In fact, there was a great deal of anti-Lincoln feeling here, especially in Nugget County. DJ cleared his throat. Devil's Law is just ahead. Teacher nodded. So it is. Both DJ and Alfred had been to Devil's Law before, begun in 1849 when the gold had been discovered in the nearby Grizzly River. Devil's Law was considered a ghost town. It now has less than 500 residents who mostly cater to tourists. The residents live in very old-fashioned frame houses built after the last great fire that destroyed their mother-lode towns. The main street was lined with red adobe buildings, that's a type of clay, having heavy iron shutters. That had been a way miners tried to keep fires from destroying everything. DJ glanced out the window, hoping he'd see Grandpa or maybe Kathy Stagg and her father walking along the high, irregular concrete walks. But there wasn't a familiar face anywhere. When the car was packed, the 2 boys and 2 adults got out and walked up and down the narrow streets looking for Grandpa in various streets and side streets and stores. Hero followed DJ. Dad showed Grandpa's picture to several small store owners, but they didn't recognize him. Dad stopped at the sheriff's office, the highway patrol officer, and even at a tiny bus station. Nobody remembered seeing anybody answering Grandpa Dillon's description. Sam Dillon drove the car slowly down the main street of Devil's Law in a final hope that they'd see the old man. But at the top of the hill leading out of town, DJ sighed deeply, with great sadness. The boy cried, "You couldn't have just disappeared, could have he?" Mrs. Keene said softly, "There's one other place to look at, the mansion." Sam Dillon mused, "But you said you'd checked it out with people there, and they hadn't seen him." "It's only a suggestion, Mr. Dillon." Dad nodded. Then let's do it. He stepped down on the accelerator and the sedan picked up speed, landing out of town. DJ leaned forward to rest his chin on the back of the front seat between Dad and Mrs. Keene. Boy, I can hardly wait to see the place. You'll see in a matter of minutes when we cross the river and start to climb down out of the canyon. It'll be off to your right. Well, actually, you'll see the cemetery on Hope Hill. The mansion's just beyond. DJ and Alfred turned in the direction Mrs. Keene pointed. The sedan rounded the curve. DJ glanced at the top of the great mountain rising from the river. There it is. It was the spookiest house DJ had ever seen. He shivered, but not from the cold. He had a funny feeling something terrible was about to happen. And that's where we're going to stop the story tonight. So tomorrow we'll read chapter 4. I want to pray blessings on you and yours, in your house, out of your house, in the day of the night. Always keep dreaming. Keep a story in your heart. I love you. I really do. But more importantly, God loves you. Well, have a nice evening. Good night.